Oh, that's what it was. That's what, yeah. Yeah, it was the hacienda. I was really.
She was, but might as well go ahead and get started here. Let's see. Where's the agenda? And then where's my statement? All right, so I'm going to call the Housing Desegregation Subcommittee meeting to order. The Commission on Equitable Housing and Development meeting has, the Commission on Equitable Housing and Development Housing Desegregation Subcommittee meeting has now commenced. It is 1:03 on February 23rd, 2023. This meeting is being held virtually due to COVID-19 to allow for social distancing and protect the public health. As we continue our efforts in meeting remotely, we ask all commissioners and guests to mute yourselves until called upon to speak to avoid feedback and background noise. For those who have dialed in using the call-in number, to unmute to speak, dial *6 on your phone. Also, prior to speaking, please announce who you are to identify yourself. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded. We ask that you only use the chat function to request to speak or to announce that you are leaving the meeting so that we can track quorum. Also, in order to comply with the state open meeting law, attendance and votes will be done by way of roll call using audio, not by using the chat function. So with that, it looks like we do have a quorum. And I will do the roll call. Lori Meserbo?
Present.
Mike Edmonds?
I am present.
And Vicky Cusino appears to not be present yet. Hopefully she'll be joining us, but we do have a quorum with 3 out of 4 of our members. The second item on the agenda is to review and adopt meeting minutes from August 2022, September, December of 2022, and January of 2023. Hey, Vicky, we're literally just getting started and are on to number 2 on the agenda, which is adoption of meeting minutes. So have you guys had a chance to review those meeting minutes? And if so, does anybody have any changes? Are you guys good to approve them?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good.
Me as well.
Okay, so without objection, the meeting minutes on the agenda are approved. Number 3 on our agenda is the ASU housing equity study. We basically have the same agenda as we had last time, and I think at least for me, what I'm hoping is that we can come to some consensus about what we want to do going forward. So I'd really love to be able to take, something or some things to the full commission based on kind of the conversations we've been having and the work that we've been doing. So I don't know exactly where we will go with that today, but that's my hope. And obviously we're, on the agenda now is the housing equity study. I hope everyone had a chance to maybe dive at least a little bit deeper into it. But I do think that there are some really good benchmarks and some things for us to take forward to the full commission. And what I think comes to my mind after looking at the study and thinking about it is, I think the study just does a good job of outlining that other cities are doing more to measure, to create the baseline and measure equity, like we've been talking about for several meetings now. So I don't know if, just to kick the discussion off, if something that we could take back to the full commission is to request that we discuss, asking the city, HCD, I don't know exactly who, but to take those steps to really create that baseline and to start to measure equity. So those are my initial thoughts. I'd really love to open it up to everybody and just see what your thoughts are about, again, generally speaking, what we've been talking about over the past several meetings, and also where we go with this equity study.
Yeah, I'd scanned through it. I didn't get a chance to like read it, like really sit down and digest it. I tell you what, I love the detail. I love the data. that is really good, man.
Yeah, for sure.
Sorry, Jake. I had them and looked at them and I can't find them. Can you remind me, do you know who sent them? Did you send them or?
I don't believe that I sent them out.
Okay.
They're definitely on the commission website.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yep, they're on the commission website, and I think I sent the email with the links to the materials on Monday evening.
Joe, feel free to chime in as well if you have any thoughts.
So I think one of the points you made, Jay, is that, you know, it shows that other cities are doing a fair amount more than we are in terms of collecting the data. And, you know, we had asked, and I'll be honest that I can't remember really what the response is, but I think that's because there wasn't really a response. We had asked, like, could we get an equity study? Who would take that on? And I wonder if as a subcommittee, part of our charge should be stating just that. Here's some data for you. You know, this was obviously done by a school group, and it's great, and there is a lot of information in it, but you know, it has information about other cities in it, which says that other cities are a little bit farther down the line than we are in terms of gathering this data and then using it to make informed decisions. And so I'm wondering if we share that and really start with that and bring back up our desire to have the city of Tucson embark on this, because I think we brought it up months and months ago and it kind of just fell flat, and now here we are. So now we have some data. Your point is, you know, is a good one, and I think one that we should probably say to the commission.
Yeah, it makes sense to me, Lori.
Hey, Jay, I haven't, I kind of wonder if we should include, and they're new, so I don't know if this really is a good idea, but I want to throw it out there. So we have this new Office of Equity. And in my view, they're just getting started because they're also pulling in more personnel to assist them with their work. I will assume we have not shared this information, which we're browsing now, with that office to see if they might have some thoughts, as well as, you know, whether or not, so to speak, if they should do an equity study, if it should be coming from their department. What do you think? What do y'all think?
Yeah, that's a really good point, Mike. And, you know, obviously the chief equity officer or whatever the position is, you know, spoke to the commission, you know, once for maybe 15 minutes and really gave us very limited information. And, you know, I know she had just been hired, but yeah, that's seems like it really, in theory, should be a piece of the puzzle. It might really be a good place to kind of center this, but I don't know. So yeah, maybe that's something we can include in our request or whatever it is we end up taking back to the full commission. Joe, I see you're unmuted.
Yeah, I'll say I thought as an academic kind of endeavor and exercise, there's certainly interesting products to read. But I mean, when we got the visit from the Department of Equity and heard about what they're doing, it really sounded like my thought was that they were very concerned about equity within city departments and processes, and not really at a point where they were going to be able to put an eye on where equity is and isn't in our community. So I was pretty disappointed with that, and I'm not sure if this is something that they will either want to or have the capacity to. Ideally, you would want both take on. And I'll say this about the products that we got. I kind of thought we were going to have a look at equity in the city a little bit, and I feel like what we got wasn't really a comparative. Hey, here's how things are going in Tucson versus how things are going in other places. It really is just how we measure it. It's like a football coach asks, hey, did we get 10 yards for the first down? And the referee gives them an explanation of why we use yards instead of meters and how we measure things on the football field, rather than, oh yeah, you got that, and now you can move on and call the next play.
That's hilarious.
So it wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be, but I don't want to denigrate the work. I don't want to. I know that a lot went into it, and for what it is, it's very interesting and it is relevant. But my concern perpetually is that we kind of kick the can on, well, do we need an equity study? Because this group at ASU is going to look into studying equity. And we come back with, well, here are how other places are measuring equity. Not whether there is equity, but how, oh, that's a cute dog. Sorry, I got distracted by Vicky's dog. It's very cute. Where was I?
That's hilarious.
Oh, yeah, so my concern is that we get on that track, and so the city goes, oh great, okay, we'll look into how other places are studying equity. And 6 months down the road, we get, here are the parameters that we need to study equity, and here's the definitions we need to use to study equity. And do we need to do a study on equity? Okay, so if we do a study on equity, what happens at the end of that? Is there action that says, hey, we found that here are the areas where we're lacking, and here are the things that other places do, and here are the things that we think are deficient in our policies and processes? Do we get action on that? And people always tell me, well, don't think that far ahead of it. You got to do those first steps and follow that path. But my perpetual concern becomes, a few years ago, we had something that was about displacement and gentrification in downtown, in the IID and CD Central Business District. And the decision that showed, hey, this is a problem. This is a rampant problem. Here's how we tried to define it. Here's how we tried to quantify it. And what we got was, well, we'll make a task force. Well, we'll make a commission. And it's not going to be about displacement and gentrification. It's going to be about equity, which means you're free to spend the next 3 years defining equity, figuring out how to measure it. And in the meantime, we've done the work of creating that. And I know that's not entirely true. I know the city's not sitting on their hands. I know we've got the HASP plan and PCHIP and things like that. But my perpetual concern is, as we talk about wanting to have a bias for action, that this perpetuates a situation where it's the opposite, where we get bogged down in the definition and the measurement and not what we know is going on, which is displacement, gentrification, and lack of affordability that are leading us to these outcomes with homelessness and people being displaced and all these negative things we don't want, that we know are going on. We're going to let those keep perpetuating while we do that part of it. So that's my concern about what we've got and what to do with it going forward.
Yeah, that makes sense, Joe. And I think, I agree. I think the study itself leaves some things to be desired. But ultimately, you know, I feel like these kinds of studies, most people, us included, you know, don't read them very deeply, don't spend a lot of time with them for obvious reasons, right? I mean, they're dense and we're all busy. It's not a criticism, it's just the reality. So for me, this was more of a way to put a pin in the fact that this is an important issue and to show how the city could be doing more. So I think I agree with you, and that I think is another point for me. And I do think then practically speaking about what we got from the students is, I do think that you know, there are two documents, right? One is like, where is Tucson now with kind of how it is engaging with and thinking about and measuring equity? And then here are what other cities do. And I agree, Joe. I mean, the thing that I really, and I think this is probably a self-critique, is like, well, what's the point of asking for another study, right? I mean, it's like, maybe really what we go back with as a recommendation, right? I don't know exactly what we call it, but, you know, we want to know, you know, again, we would like to know how the city is measuring equity, and if it's not, how is it going to do so going forward? And actually, you know, say that these are the questions we want answered, and not say we want an equity study. You know what I mean? It's really, to me, much more about like, what is it that we're trying to get to? Where are we trying to go that we're already? And without saying, hey, we need to get there by doing a study, or we need to get there by doing this. But I also think what the study from the students highlights for me, and then I went back before this meeting and I was like, again, like looking as closely as I could with the time I had at like P-CHIP and the HAST plan, and those documents. And at the end of the day, I think where we still are really falling short, and where I'm really struggling, and I feel like we're struggling as a subcommittee and a commission, is where are we? What is equity? What's the narrative? Like when we say, hey, how are we doing with equity? There's no narrative. There's no real narrative from the city about like, here's how we're doing and here's where we're going with it. It's like, they're just these bits and pieces, but it's just not tied together in any cohesive way that seems to be making progress. And if that's not an accurate description, I'd like for the city, quote unquote, to tell me what I'm missing. Do you know what I'm saying? So.
And to kind of extend that, like on another level, you know, people talk about what are our goals about that, and where do you want to go? And people want to have like SMART goals, like it has to be measurable. We have to be able to quantify equity if we're going to study equity and improve equity, right? Okay, how much time are you going to spend on that? Because we already know there are problems. How much time are you going to spend on that before you try to fix it? Before we know that the displacement and the gentrification and the unaffordability are happening. Where do we want to go? We want to go to a Tucson that doesn't have a persistent homeless population, that has a system where you can move through a continuum and not get stuck on, well, all there are shelter beds, all there are is temporary housing, where everybody can afford what they need from a housing standpoint, that we have enough units that are low to no income, that we have enough units at 50% AMI, that we have the units where we need them, not just going, okay, well, we've got enough units now, but they're market rate, so we're gonna need this many vouchers to make up for that. And, you know, we've got, well, if you're in shelter and we can get you into temporary housing, but after a while you can't move from temporary housing, we don't have the permanent housing. Like, I think if we're looking for a vision, isn't that the vision? And then how do we talk about making that possible and advancing that? Well, we're saying you know, defining the equity is important. And making sure that that is part of a component of that, rather than, you know, okay, another couple of years down the line, we're going to start talking about solutions for improving equity once we've defined and studied how to measure equity.
Yeah, sorry, my internet cut out. I missed maybe 20 seconds of that, but I get your gist, I think, Joe. Vicky, Lori, Mike, any thoughts in addition to or separate from?
No, just, I thought more about what Joe, I think Joe's right about that Office of Equity. Now that I think about it, I think you're right about the definition. It's inward looking, not outward looking. Yeah, I think you're right.
I guess I like the way you put it the second time around, Jay. I said maybe we need to ask for an equity study. I don't care if it's a study or if it's just questions we have, but using what we got in the study that we got to inform the city how to move forward as an equity, as a commission on equitable housing. Yeah, and just hearing, what is equity? We haven't even defined it. Like, I will tell you, when either Joe said that or you said that, Jay, I thought, oh my God, we're going on 3 years on this commission. Like, oh dear, like we've dropped the ball if we don't even really know what that means at this point, or where we're headed as a community.
Yeah, that makes sense. Go ahead, Allison.
Just a couple thoughts are coming to mind. Joe, you'll get no argument from me that it can be frustrating to keep kind of trying to define the problem and study it versus kind of take what we know and move forward on those pieces. And then I just wanted to add on just Lori's last point. So we do have shared language as a commission. Just want to remind the subcommittee of that in the first. So it's on the Liz Wilson kind of took us through that whole kind of conversation. It was one of the first meetings. So we do have a commission. I mean, maybe it's worth kind of revisiting some of that shared language and kind of how we're using it. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I just wonder, Lori, did you mean more like we haven't defined a baseline of where we are in terms of equity for the city, as opposed to like, what does equity mean as a definition?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope you didn't think I was being really flip, Allison, that like we as a commission don't even know what equity means. I mean like what does that mean beyond the definition of the word and our work as a commission? Yes. So yes.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, that's fair. And right, sort of, yeah, defining where the city is. I'm sorry, I'm sort of just jumping around to a few different things that I wanted to maybe mention. So one is the Office of Equity. While I do agree, I think it's they're kind of really focused on helping the departments figure out how they're approaching equity. I think especially from HCD standpoint, a lot of that is in reference to how are we approaching equity citywide in terms of our housing policies. So I think there's some room there.
How much are they engaging with y'all, Allison?
What's that?
How much are they engaging with y'all?
So, I mean, they are definitely still getting their feet under them. I don't want to, say like, oh yeah, we're in the background figuring out all of these things, but they're starting to put in place things like helping us, analyze our budgets from an equity framework. They just announced today we have equity coordinators now in each office who are going to help kind of do an equity plan for each department. The piece that I wanted to talk about, as we're talking about just data and kind of understanding where the city sits. I will say one of my, how do I want to say this? Right, over the course of even my time at HCD or with the city, we've had a number of different sort of indices or data studies. Right, the Poverty and Urban Stress Report used to be in its own index. The Housing Market Study created a Neighborhood Vulnerability Index. A lot of different departments around the city have created their own equity indices, right? There's a tree equity, a transportation equity index. So we're all, it's like, we've all started trying to like incorporate equity, and you will again hear no argument from me that there maybe is a lack of kind of a cohesive framework that we're all operating under. So my understanding is one thing that the Equity Office is doing is working on kind of a citywide equity index, and kind of in a way mandating what that will look like. And so just wanted to throw that out there, that's kind of a, as you're thinking about actions and how do we study this, that's one thing in motion, and they're doing the background work to make sure that what should be in there. And they're aware of the ASU study. I'll make sure that they kind of revisit it as well. And then just want to remind folks, I know the next agenda item is also the affirmatively furthering for housing, where we might be able to put some of this like equity focus for our housing work. And I think there was one other thing that I have now forgotten. So there's a prosperity initiative that the county is kind of spearheading right now, where they're trying to, kind of identify region-wide some bigger picture policy priorities. And it just kind of makes me think that that might be an opportunity. So we're having a conversation at the next full commission meeting. So just to kind of tee that up for you all, that might also be an opportunity to push for or request that the city, county kind of take a stab at adopting an overarching equity policy. And that kind of might be some of the framework that could kind of get a lot of people in the room to adopt that overarching policy that could inform our action. And those are really what I'm excited about. Thank you.
That's great, Allison. Thank you for sharing that. I just really think it's imperative that the Equity Office for the city be engaging with our commission on a regular basis. It's shocking to me, honestly, that they have not been, knowing that we exist. I really think they need to take the initiative there, and we need to invite them to come on a regular basis, quarterly or something. I think that that's critical, because if they're not also focusing outwardly, I think that, in my opinion, they're really missing what their charge is. I mean, I think the internal thing is critical. I like what you're saying, but like you got to do both, or else I feel like they're really missing what they're supposed to be doing. So I'd really love to have them in attendance more, because I mean, this is what we're asking. And so again, if we're struggling with equity and how to measure it and whatnot, and they are as well, and there's no communication there, that's a big thing that I think we need to take care of. Go ahead, Vicki.
Oh, I'm sorry. You could finish. I
No,
just,
please.
well, a couple things. Well, I think it would be interesting to get clarification about that office's priorities, because I do think when that position was advertised, it did seem to be more inward facing. And I always know, when you create new positions in departments, they can evolve over time. And I just don't want to make assumptions about what we think they're supposed to be doing if that's not part of it. But I think Allison mentioned the shared language. And I think that this was actually shared before I started on the commission. And I do wonder about revisiting it, or maybe I just don't understand it well. But like when I look at the definition of equity, I would define it completely different. I don't see equity as being a strategy. At least in the way we've been talking about it. I guess I'm curious as to why it's being described as a strategy. It's a very long definition that I don't quite understand, and I would define it differently. And then the other thing is when I look at, and I know there are different reports, but like the city's people, communities, home investment report, it talks about inequity and equity a lot without really a definition, and I know it has to be general, but I mean, honestly, I read that plan every time it comes out and it's always very similar. And so I'm just wondering if we could ever get to the point where there's some more measurable goals.
Yeah, 100%. Before we go on with the conversation, I'm just noticing in the chat, there's a Victoria Alice who's chatting a lot. Is that, I don't see that person in the meeting, and I know that we're also supposed to not be using the chat except to ask to speak, I believe. Is that what? So
Yeah,
anyway.
they're showing as an attendee, Jay.
What's that?
They're showing as an attendee. They're an attendee.
Oh, okay. All right, is that person going to speak? I think we're not supposed to be using the chat in this manner. Is that correct?
That is the goal. Yes.
Okay.
We've enabled the chat to be able to kind of, say when you arrive and when folks leave, and to share links. But yeah, ideally, kind of raising hands to speak, and then the co-chair can acknowledge folks when you want them to speak.
Okay, so Victoria, Alice, whoever you are, if you have some comments, we'd love to hear them, but please refrain from putting them in the chat.
Can I just say it's confusing though? I see the comments in the chat, but I don't see that person listed. Oh, I see under attendees. And so you have it set up so only panelists show.
So as a webinar,
okay.
yeah,
I get it now.
There's two tabs. One is for
Okay.
panelists, kind of the regular guests and staff and commissioners, and then there's attendees.
Yeah, I got it. And so then only the panelists have like a camera view. Okay.
And how would the attendees speak then? If they're how does that work?
Attendees can still raise their hand.
Okay.
And we would be able to see that. Neto and I monitor.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry to diverge there. Yeah, I think just to your point, Vicki, I think that what it seems like we're all coming back to is this idea of really measuring, right? It's like you were saying, it's like there's this report that talks about all of these things that I think we would all agree are important, but at the end of the day, again, where are we with those? So all of this being said, y'all, in the context of, we've got the study from the students, I think we're all still kind of questioning, after a few years of being on the commission, not totally understanding the kind of maybe equity narrative of the city and how things are being measured. Just in that context, I just wanted to kind of take everybody's temperature in terms of if there's something that we can define now, because I'm sure we could keep talking about it, but is there something that we can define now that we want to take to the full commission, whether it's I don't know. Is there something that we can kind of formulate to either, take back to the full commission or make a motion, or I just want to see where we are with that. Because I'm not totally sure, honestly.
Well, before I speak, I didn't know if you wanted to acknowledge the raised hand or not
What raised hand?
in attendees.
Victoria Alice does now have her hand up, and I am allowing her to talk.
Sure, go ahead, Victoria.
Could we ask that the city give a more defined basis, like they created the HAST plan? So the way that they wrote that, the kind of formula and explanation and all that, can we get that same thing for equity?
Good question.
Okay.
Certainly something we can put in the mix, though. I think that's kind of where we're going. Any more thoughts about y'all about what we want to take back to the full commission in terms of yeah.
I think from the perspective of the Housing Desegregation Subcommittee, I suppose that my ask is, if we're bringing something to the General Commission, that we do so and say, as we are measuring equity, when we're finding out our definition and our measuring stick and how many equities we have and how many equities we need and how many equities we're short and how we obtain 7 more equities to get to our equity goal, that all our policies move forward with desegregation in mind, which is something that is not as I think nebulously defined as equity. And we move forward with wanting desegregation, wanting housing affordability, wanting policies that don't displace people, wanting policies that don't enhance gentrification, so that we don't end up in a situation where we go, oh yeah, we've got all the bad things, and the policies around that are all just going to keep going, you know?
Right. Yeah, it's thanks for taking it back to desegregation as well, because that's point taken.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking too, Jay. I mean, along what Joe was saying, because in my mind, when I'm thinking about the desegregation subcommittee, and I probably should be thinking proactively, and to be honest with you, I'm not, because I've kind of got my eyes open on Tucson Norte Sur, because to me, that's an obvious situation that will need to have discussions about equity, as well as what we delivered yesterday as a commission, what we delivered yesterday to mayor and council. Before I can deeply think about inequities and equities, I want to see where that goes. We delivered it and they said they like it. Now let's see what happens.
Right. And I'm also glad that you raised that point, Mike, because one of the things that I was thinking about in terms of like the agenda for the next full commission meeting is, I feel like really what we've done as a full commission is focused on affordable housing. And that's great. I mean, it's certainly a piece of the puzzle. And I'm very glad that we did that, and we've been very supportive. But we did just deliver recommendations to mayor and council about how to basically produce more affordable housing, like what can be done, what needs to be looked at. So from the standpoint of affordable housing, as far as this commission goes, I don't know what else we can really do. I mean, maybe other folks have an idea. And I'm just saying that because I do think that, it's time for us as a commission to focus on desegregation, focus on gentrification and displacement. There are all of these other equity things, housing stability, evictions, homelessness, that haven't gotten a ton of attention. So, that's where I would like to see us as a commission focus more as well. Go ahead, Vicki.
Well, going back to the language, I'm sorry I keep revisiting this, but I know it's not for this committee, but I really think it would be worth revisiting that. You just threw out additional terms that actually aren't defined in the shared language. And I'm not sure that everybody would, you ask 10 people to define something, you'll get 10 different definitions. And I think what we're using as shared language document was a presentation. It looks like a PowerPoint. And there's just so much. I almost feel like it's good to maybe have the longer explanations, but it would be really great to have like a 1 or 2 page kind of glossary or quick reference. Like, you know, some of them, the definition takes 3 slides. I think that's a lot to wade through. And so in terms of equity, I'd love to see us have something that's written in more plain language that is not only, well, that would be easier for everybody to digest, and it helps to ensure that we really are on the same page. You know, if it's in plain language, I see a lot of definitions that were, you know, taking from other sources, and I get it. That's maybe important to show where they came from. But some of it, you know, it's a HUD definition. It's written in HUD-ese. And so anyway, I just think that I know I saw the last slide said, are there other definitions? Like, I don't know, maybe we need to explain what we mean by talking about desegregation. What exactly does that look like, or what does it mean?
Right.
And again, I think the equity definition could use a little bit of refinement. Not that it's wrong, but it's a bit much to try to interpret.
Well, what about this, y'all? What if the ask is something like, you know, broadly speaking, we as the desegregation subcommittee want to recenter equity in the work that the commission is doing. And Vicky, to your point, maybe the kind of first step in doing that is re-examining the language, like you mentioned, the definitions, like you mentioned, and also, you know, recentering or maybe centering for the first time some of these other equity issues that have never gotten any voice or any discussion on this commission moving forward, like, you know, housing stability, or, you know, eviction prevention, or you know, things like that. So I mean, that to me seems like if we maybe say, you know, we want to recenter equity and start to focus as a commission on those topics, and we suggest starting by revisiting the language and definitions. And again, you know, what I suggested as an agenda item for the next full commission meeting kind of was this, you know, hey, we've already covered the affordable housing piece. Let's, you know, see what other equity things we need to refocus on. Does that make sense to folks? Does it seem like we're maybe getting a little bit of a framework about what to take back to the full commission? Victoria, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
I participate in like these public housing education things, so I can already have a list of identified policies, regulations, common things that go wrong all around, you know, the United States. And so Joe seems really aware of them, but the Norte Sur thing that the other guy mentioned, and I can't believe I don't remember his name from yesterday, but he had Mike had a really good point about that, because as far as I know, I sign up for the city little email. It comes in the email, and there's like a little digest of what's going on. And Norte Sur showed up in there, and I went through my to my trash in my email immediately, because the way that they listed it was like, if you want to have any say on the Norte Sur, it had nothing to do with housing. It couldn't have grabbed the eye of anybody who was concerned about segregation. And I noticed on social media with some of the People's Initiative and activist groups, they kept mentioning it from their own led perspective, that this is where we have to go to like try to point to it. And that was only one woman in one group. So it's like nobody actually could have known it to say anything about it. And that kind of freaked me out like instantly. I was like, oh crap, because if I can pull that up and see that they're not actually letting people know, and then the way that they're wording it is not letting them being able to identify that this would be that solution, that would be that issue, that would be that concern. So there's no,
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
I actually don't know which where to find it on the website. What was the part of the city that did that?
Yeah.
Planning and development?
I don't know. I know that Mike is one of the ambassadors for the discussion. I don't know exactly what the title is, Mike, but maybe you could connect with Victoria afterwards as well to provide some more information there. But I mean, also Victoria, to your point, you know, something that Joe has brought up a number of times is the fact that even talking about the potential of Norte Sewer is enough to potentially start off some you know, developers looking at sites, and the word is escaping me, but anyway, that could essentially set off a land rush, and you know, not considering the housing piece of that and how it's going to affect, you know, gentrification and displacement. You know, it really needs to be part of the conversation. So I think we're all with you there. Vicky, was your hand up as well?
Yeah, but I'll probably just complicate things. Well, two things. One comment was just about the language, and then I'm done with it. And that is just that anticipating some people might not think we need to revisit it. I would just emphasize, I think I just want to emphasize that in writing things in plain language really benefits everybody. And I think that really could help us frame things better and focus on more measurable goals, because everything feels so big. And I wondered though about some of these things that we should always, like in making decisions, be thinking about, you know, how it impacts sort of those different elements. And I just wondered about developing something more visual, sort of a decision framework, so that like at a glance, having, you know, all the equity issues related to, you know, housing and development that we could look at as things come up.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like my expertise isn't housing. So I do have to go back to those documents, and it's just a lot to try to take in as new things come up.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. And I do think, you know, you're onto something as well, Vicky, just because, you know, even as a commission that, you know, theoretically, you know, we're on the commission because we understand what equity means and how it relates to housing. I still think that we're, as a group, not that far along in having that kind of common language and common framework about exactly what you're saying. So I think it could be a good thing. And you know, again, I think that one of the things that's just interesting about what's happening currently is affordable housing has gotten to be such a huge topic. And though affordable housing is complex in, like, you know, how it gets built and all the mechanisms, like what's not complex about it is the fact that we can all conceptualize that we need a place to stay that we can afford. And so it's an easy concept. And I think these concepts of equity are a lot less, they're just more gray. They're just more difficult to kind of grasp. It's like almost like sand going through your fingers in a way. So I think to me, it kind of explains why we focused on what we focused on so far as a commission. So so just to kind of take us back to maybe what we can take back. And again, I don't know if this is an ask or if this is a, you know, what exactly we call it, but, you know, I think that the ask is we want to refocus on equity related issues. And from our committee standpoint, you know, having desegregation be at the front, but gentrification and displacement was another issue, and just other housing equity related issues. And that from there, you know, we think a good first step to kind of help recenter that is to revisit the language that we're using, the definitions that we're using. And Vicky, I don't know how to say this exactly, but to essentially come up with like some sort of visual framework for kind of like how decisions get made, or a visual framework for?
Yeah, I'll have to think about that. I was thinking like a decision matrix, or maybe it's, I don't know if I probably should look it up to find the exact term of what I'm envisioning.
Yeah.
Um,
And we don't, we
But-
don't need to have that like exactly defined for our motion to the full commission, but I like that idea. That's good. So I don't know, is that where we are at this point, or is there more that we want to, take back to the full commission, our ask, or at least
Well-
regarding kind of this third topic?
Yeah, well, let me try to quickly touch on some things and then get back to the subject at hand. So Victoria Alice, I think maybe I did see you yesterday at the Mayor Council Chambers. If you'd like information on Tucson Notre Dame, I'm going to ask you to email our CEHD email address, which Allison Netto, is it CEHD@TucsonAZ.gov? Do we have that? Is that alive? There should be an email address on our website. So I'm going to ask you to send your contact information there, and they will
Okay.
route it to me, and then we can talk about Norte Sur away from this.
Okay.
Beyond that, again, based on what we submitted to mayor and council yesterday, my mind is I'm very interested in seeing what they're going to do with that, because then I'm going to want to look at it like, is this equitable? Because instead of looking at the area, again, Tucson Norte Sur on my mind, that I know we have some equity concerns about.
Mhm.
When mayor and council say, okay, we're going to go forward with this, we're going to do that, and they're talking citywide, now we all have to open our view and look at equity, inequity citywide, not just an area. I don't have like a geographic area I can really nail down that I could just wrap my mind around. Does that make any sense? So as far as the desegregation subcommittee goes, taking it back to the full commission, as far as a shared language. So we have that document. I thought it was a suggestive document, not necessarily a voted upon document. Beyond that, any definitions we must adhere to, because that's what HUD or the state or whatever adheres to. I figure we're kind of locked in that regard. I do agree with what she said about the first few words of the equity definition, a strategy as opposed to, I can't think of the right word I'm looking for, but like an actionable plan, something we're going to do that's going to be equitable. So I do agree with that. Where do we go back to the commission with this? I'm not sure, Jay. I just dumped what I had on my mind on you.
Yeah, no, that's great. Thank you.
I added I'm hoping the chat can be used for. I added the CEHD email address in the chat. It is CEHD@TucsonAZ.gov. Thank you.
Cool. Also, just a little bit of a side note, but from the study from the students looking at Seattle, one of the things they mentioned was the Equitable Community Indicators Report. And I pulled it up. It's the Seattle Office of Planning and Community Development. Can I put the link in the chat? Actually, I have the PDF pulled up. Let's see if I still have the link up. I'll pull the link up and throw it in the chat, but basically it is a really, I think, excellent example of what can be done to really look at the indices, talk about why they matter, and to be able to measure going forward. So I do think that that's the kind of a good thing about this study, is it really does point to a city that is doing it differently. So that's a little bit of a side note I wanted to throw in there, but let's see. Also, we've been talking for about an hour. I just kind of want to be mindful of our time as well. Let's see. I mean, I guess they're all, so number 4 is affirmatively furthering fair housing, the new proposed rule, which we talked about last time. 5 is the discussion of issues related to gentrification and displacement, and ideas for action. Number 6 is HAST implementation updates and discussion. So in a lot of ways, I think most of those things really kind of fit under the discussion that we're having right now. So I guess I think we're okay in terms of our time frame. I guess what I'm proposing, if you guys are okay with it, and I'm happy to, wordsmith this a little bit. I don't think I'm going to have it exactly right, but what we are proposing to the full commission, or what our recommendation to the full commission is that now that we have submitted our recommendations for affordable housing to mayor and council, that we want to recenter our work going forward as a full commission to focus on all of the other equity issues that are out there, or to start to focus on other equity issues, including desegregation, gentrification and displacement, which was a key thing for the commission in the first place. And I would include like maybe something broad like housing stability and related issues. And that we propose that we take time as a commission to revisit the language and definitions that we're using, and in that process, start to define where we want to focus our time and energy related to equity issues. And I think, side note, that's where we can kind of take up the conversation regarding, creating the baseline and measuring equity going forward. So does that sound like a relatively cohesive recommendation to the full commission? Is that encapsulating well enough kind of what we're talking about here and what we're wanting to do? Is there anything, do we want to do that? And if so, is there anything that's missing that needs to be added to our recommendation? And is that what it is? Is this a recommendation to the full council?
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about something that not necessarily for what you're thinking about presenting to the council. Let me ask you this as a subcommittee, because of what we've done in the past few weeks about the document we submitted to mayor and council. Should we consider as a subcommittee, it's going to take some time, I know. Yeah. I'm hesitant to present this because it's time consuming and it's labor intensive.
The time is 2 p.m.
Thank you very much. Should we consider having conversations with ward offices about equity and desegregation issues as a subcommittee?
Right. It's a great point, Mike.
Because I'm wondering if it's different in different wards.
Right. Yeah, because we just did that about the housing affordability and affordable housing stuff, but have not done that with all of these other issues. And just an interesting side note as well, y'all. When Jim and I visited Ward 2 to discuss our recommendations for the affordable housing recommendations, they noted that at Ward 2 that for the first time ever, housing issues appeared to be what the constituents were calling most about, and it was has always been roads and potholes, and for the first time now, people housing is past roads. So they noted that as a pretty significant indicator of where their constituents were. But I think that's a great idea, Mike. Is that something that you and you, Mike, and the rest of y'all think is something that should go into our ask? Because I mean, I can see how, again, we've kind of got, as I see, a couple of parts, right? We want to recenter equity in the work we're doing. We want to do that by revisiting the language and definitions that we're using, and this kind of potential visual document that Vicky's talking about with a kind of decision matrix thing. And we're doing this to figure out what equity topics we want to explore and address as a commission. And the next piece of that is that we would like to suggest having more in-depth conversation with the ward offices about what equity topics, just about equity issues, right? What they're seeing, and so that we can kind of get a back and forth to help guide our work as a commission going forward. That kind of going to the ward offices being the kind of third piece of our request.
Because I'm hoping they can help us get deeper into it, even if we have to go look at it from like a neighborhood standpoint, you know what I mean?
And I think it would, to back to our bigger conversation, help the ward offices also to understand what equity means and to help them center equity. So kind of a helping them to understand as well. Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
If we want to have those conversations with ward offices, I don't think that's a bad thing. My concern, from, I think it was in the Affordable Housing Subcommittee, was that somebody from Ward 3 actually had dropped by and was attending various meetings and said, hey, here are some of the things we're hearing from constituents. We really are becoming aware that one of the big issues in housing affordability is speculative investment, and how that's leading to more concentration. So our constituents said, hey, is there something we can do about this? What can we do about and I think the way they phrased it was out of state investors. They waited until that person was gone at the next meeting and said, well, what are we going to do? The Interstate Commerce Clause, we can't stop people from investing in commodifying housing. And like, it was just so damn disrespectful of that commission to not just Ward 3 and that person, but to the constituents that would never hear that, but really, really kind of ticked me off. And one of the reasons I think it's hard to engage with that commission or with that subcommittee is stuff like that. But if you're talking about the commission as a whole, and we're actually going to say, have some kind of a dialogue where we take those things seriously, I mean, I think that's fine. I just I don't want to have people who are going to be dismissive of the board's issues going into those meetings and ending up like that. It made me a little mad when it happened.
Yeah, understood. Thanks, Joe. All right, Elle, where are we? Go ahead, Victoria. Victoria, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
I believe that behavior is called dismissing. And there's a list of behaviors I can send to you because I take like immense therapy and into psychology. So those behaviors can be very clearly identified. And I just wanted to mention that's the thing that we're looking for is an indicator, like a public engagement index and like a public engagement model and a public education model. And KED SMART goals. So I'm writing this up on a document and then I'll send it to you guys.
Great, thank you. All right, y'all. So where are we? I think we've got a framework of a recommendation to the full commission with the addition of the suggestion of engaging the ward offices in conversations about equity. Where are we? Are we getting to a place where we've got a solid recommendation that's kind of capturing at least enough of what we're talking about here to get it in front of the full commission?
Can I just ask about engaging with the wards? Is it to provide education on the issues that this commission is trying to address, or to gather information on the equity issues that they're seeing in their ward, or both? I just wondered if we could solidify that a bit.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was gonna say, well, initially my thought about it was that, a two-way street, two-way conversation. We converse with them about where we're going, where we want to go, what we're trying to do, and just otherwise just really listen to hear what they have to say, see if there's something they can contribute that we can use. And I'm basing this off of something I overheard, and I think it was Jay and Jim really that said it. And I think maybe Jim had made the comment about, you know, them walking into a ward office and trying to have a conversation with people who really they weren't prepared for the meeting. Let's just say they just didn't. They didn't understand some terminology, which is you know, that's understandable, but it was kind of like the commission members were there to communicate with them our thoughts, our feelings, our goals, our concerns, and they were just coming off of another meeting, getting ready to go to another meeting. That's the impression I got from that description. Was that correct, Jay?
Yes, I can see how that it came across that way for sure. And particularly, I'll say Steve Kozacek was the only actual council member who met with us, and he really knew what he was talking about. He had read the recommendations and he had an opinion about each one. So compared to the way that Steve K engaged with us versus the other ward offices, I would say that description makes sense to me. Go ahead, Victoria.
Yeah, so when getting the city involved, I'm gonna put some basic things. I'm already typing it up. They are the officials. They have training I do not have. So these are as good as I can formulate it from a higher level of consciousness, I guess. And I'm going to bring it to you, and then you can bring it to them, because it pretty much is something that they would have to approve or agree upon. And they should be able to understand this. This comes from their sector of existence. So, I mean, it's really up to one of you guys to represent everything I put on here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. But I think also to all of y'all's points, and Vicky, to your question, I do think, at least, you know, the way that I would think about it is, you know, we would engage the ward offices to have an understanding of what their constituents are bringing to them related to housing and equity. But again, you know, to Mike's point as well, I do think actually, you know, it'll be more of a two-way street, because I do think that there's education to be done for the ward offices about equity. And Vicky, I think it goes back to, you know, your suggestion about revisiting our language and the definitions and whatnot, and, you know, then prioritizing what areas of housing equity we want to focus on. And that, you know, there will be a fair amount of education, because I do think that, you know, equity, you know, I'm happy that equity has become a term that's used a lot more. I think that's valuable, but I do think, you know, when it gets to be as mainstream as it is now, it kind of becomes like sustainability, right? It's like sustainability has lost all meaning, you know, in my opinion. So, but having that conversation to me seems like a two-way street. Do you think it's important, Vicky, that we clarify that in our recommendation in terms of engaging with the ward offices? I'm happy to, you know, say something like, you know, engage in a dialogue with the ward offices about equity, because at least that to me means there's, you know, back and forth, that we're not just like delivering information to them. But what do you think?
Well, I just wanted to clarify it for us, and I feel like this committee is fairly organized and can also institute some best practices that maybe others can follow. And so what I was thinking is, and I can't believe I'm going to say this because I know that I'm not real good with structure, but I'm trying to impose some more structure. You know, if it is to get information, then I think it's important at those meetings to ask the same questions the same way of all of them. and then somebody should be, and maybe this happened with the others, but somebody should be designated to actually capture that information. You know, it's almost like doing a focus group, right? But so if we want to get the information, if we plan for it and do it in a somewhat structured way, I think the information can be more usable. And then I also wondered if it is about education, and it sounds like not all the ward offices are on the same page with things. Would it be helpful to have something printed, you know, whatever our agenda is for the meeting, or points that, you know, from an advocacy perspective, like what do you want them to remember after you leave? Do we create something, whether it's visual or in print, just to kind of reiterate things, or that they can refer to later or share with their staffs, something like that. So I don't know that this needs to go to the whole commission. I was just sort of thinking through what that would look like, so that at the end of it, you know, we have information that we can report on, and you can compare, you know, okay, this is what Ward 1 says compared to Ward 6 on this, the same questions, you know, so you're asking sort of the same things. Not that you couldn't ask other things, but if you really want to get a comparison of what's going on, it should be asked in the same way. So just some thoughts.
It's a great point, and actually reflecting back on the meetings that we had with the ward offices with our affordable housing recommendations, Jim actually did a really good job of that. He had the handout with the actual recommendations laid out, and a couple of other handouts about like how low-income housing tax credits worked, and just went over the same thing each time, and basically then was like, you know, do you have any questions? And then I think he asked every ward, what else do we need to know? What else do we need to be focusing on from your perspective? So it was actually structured like that. And to your point, it made the meetings, I thought, really well. And it's just easier to understand, right? Everybody's kind of giving the same answer. And then like, I can come back and say to you, well, this ward office asked no questions, and you know, this ward office said this, that, or the other, and this. So it's a great point. And I'm with you too. I think it's a good way to go about it if we get to that point, but maybe not necessary for our recommendation to the full commission. Okay, what else, y'all? I mean, I feel like we've kind of got our ask. I can say it again, summarize it again, and see if we're all in agreement. It's 2:15, so I think it'd be good for us to kind of wrap this part up and get through the rest of our agenda, which I don't think will take too long. But so here's the ask, as I kind of have it jotted down again. I know I've repeated it a few times, but I'm going to do it again. Our recommendation to the full commission is that the commission refocus its efforts on analyzing, understanding, and moving forward policies that address desegregation, gentrification and displacement, and housing instability. I think maybe just have those three, and that we suggest a good starting point is to revisit the language that the shared language that we're using, and shared definitions that we're using, and that we have a visualization of a decision matrix. And again, I don't have the precise language on that, but that's the kind of second piece. And then the third piece is that we would also recommend that the commissioners, that we as a commission re-engage in conversations, dialogues with the ward offices related to equity, to understand what they're seeing, and to also for us then to help educate the ward offices about equity and generally about the work that we're doing. Does that encapsulate what we have discussed as a good recommendation?
I like it.
Cool. All right, I will, after this meeting, I will write that up a little bit more clearly. Incidentally, and I probably should have said this in the beginning, but I kind of forgot. I'm actually not going to be at the next meeting, unfortunately. I'm going to be in DC with the National Fair Housing Alliance. So I don't know, maybe Lori or if somebody else wants to, but Lori, if you would take the recommendation to the full commission, I can write it up and y'all can handle it, I guess. Is that all right?
Yes, as long as you send me notes, because I will admit I was not taking notes.
I'll send you my notes, which may or may not be helpful, but I will certainly write up a little more clearly the ask. I don't know, does it make sense, or is it even possible to, if I write up the ask a little bit more clearly, to send it around to the subcommittee members, or is that too tedious?
I would like a copy, you know.
Okay. Great. I'll send it around and then I guess we can wordsmith it. Is that okay if we do that? I mean, are we running afoul of any like open meeting, anything?
I think technically, yeah, working on a shared document outside of a commission meeting is technically afoul of open meeting law, unfortunately.
Can he then share the final product to other subcommittee members? Okay. I guess it's on you, man.
Yeah, fingers crossed. Go ahead, Vicky.
Well, so Allison, so he can share it, but we can't make any changes or comments. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, like the way I kind of think of it is sort of collaborating on something outside of an open meeting that the public can listen to is kind of the general rule.
Okay, I'm going to solve this problem right now. We're going to do this together in 5 minutes so that we're all clear. Let's see. I'm going to open up a Word doc and I'm going to give me a second and I'm going to get it started from my notes and then we can wordsmith it.
All right, I can tell you where the period goes.
Okay, so let's see. Part one. So our recommendation for the full commission: refocus the Commission for Equitable Housing and Development's work on equity issues, including desegregation, gentrification and displacement, housing instability, and other related topics as determined by the commission. Does that capture well enough the first piece of the puzzle?
Yeah, to me.
Okay. Give me a second here. Let me see if I captured the second piece. We suggest as a first step, revisiting our shared language and definitions of equity and creating a visual representation of the decision-making matrix. So the last part, I don't think I quite captured. Vicky, if you could help me to capture what you meant there. I don't think I captured it quite right. So I say, we suggest as a first step, revisiting our shared language and definitions of equity and creating a visual representation of the decision-making matrix.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a matrix. I put something in the chat to you. I think it's sort of, I guess what I'm trying to describe is when I look at all that language, I feel like sometimes there's overlap and I just feel like it's so disconnected. So I wish we could do a visual, you know, of the issues to kind of show where things might be related and to just have at a glance all of the things we need to be keeping track of. So I don't know if it's like an issues framework or
Yeah.
and the other piece I just would advocate for is in revisiting the shared language, if we could either make some revisions or create another supplementary document that's in plain language.
Okay. We suggest as a first step, revisiting our shared language and definitions of equity. Say again. What was the piece you said?
Oh, about having them written in plain language. So whether it's, I don't know if it's revising them so that those are written in plain language or creating, you know, like a 1 or 2 pager with simplified definitions written in plain language. That is easy for anybody anywhere to understand versus in government language. Or if not, I mean, there actually is sort of some precise stuff for plain language, if not plain language, like plainer.
Yeah. So
or more simple language.
we suggest as a first step, revisiting and revising if necessary, our shared language and definitions of equity in plain language that can be easily understood by all. Does that get close enough?
Well, yeah, but I mean, if others agree, if it's just me, then it doesn't have to be part of the recommendation.
I guess if I can just ask I understand the need for shared language that is easy to understand. I guess I need to understand how that relates to what we're asking of the commission. Yeah, I don't even know how to frame it, Vicky. But why that is important and related to the other ask about equity? Is it because our definition of equity isn't clear, or it's just all the definitions? Because if I'm going to present this at the commission, I want to make sure that I can answer questions if folks should ask.
To me, Vicky, if I could just jump in, I mean, what I understood you saying, Vicky, is, and I agree with this, like if we're going to go back and open up this idea of looking at shared language and definitions, we want to do it. If we're going to do it, we need to do it with the thought of also making it as plain as possible, right?
Okay, that's
Is
helpful.
that accurate, Vicky?
Yes, and you know, what's being used, you know, the reference as shared language is a PowerPoint presentation. So, you know, there's a lot there. It's not an easy document to look at and reference if you want to look up a definition or get an example. So I get it, maybe all of that was needed for the training but it's difficult to use as sort of a reference document for shared language, to me.
Well, I think it's a good point to note that it was created by one commission member as well, who kind of did that on their own, which was really lovely. That Liz put the work into that, but we, we didn't necessarily really agree on those terms before it was presented to the commission. So this is helpful for me to hear, that we should probably all agree on what we're going to use, and I don't even maybe even vote on that, rather than just one commission member take that on by themselves, and then we're all supposed to adopt that, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess I'm not saying necessarily change it entirely, but revisit it and refine it. I think some of the language could really be simplified. That's my biggest piece. And then maybe there's that original document, but we can maybe create something that's more of a reference, or a guide. That was just my thought. Something that's a little bit more user-friendly to reference for shared language.
That seems pretty clear to me. Does that make sense to you, Lori, at least for the purposes of talking to the full commission?
It does. Thank you for walking through that.
Sure. So what I have here based on this conversation as the second piece, as a first step, we suggest revisiting and revising our shared language and definitions of equity in plain language that can be easily understood and used by all. We would like to create a visual representation of the equity issues framework that we are using. I see your hand, Victoria, but in the interest of time, we're running a little short. I'm gonna keep going with working through this with the subcommittee members. Sorry about that. Okay, so that seems okay, and I'll reread the whole thing once we get this third piece. Give me a second here. All right, this is a little rough, but we would like to engage with the mayor and council in dialogue about the equity issues that we are focusing on. We will listen to the mayor and council to understand their constituents' housing concerns and educate the mayor and council about equity issues. We will educate the mayor and council about equity issues that our commission is working on.
Real quick, since there are a bunch of people who just did the meetings with mayor and council, are we talking about an ongoing dialogue where these are going to be regular quarterly, twice yearly meetings or whatever?
That's kind of what I thought, but I don't think that's been defined exactly. What do y'all think? To me, that
ongoing engagement.
Yeah. Okay. Does that ring true for you, Vicky, Lori, and Mike? Kind of ongoing
Yeah, I don't want to lock us into anything that we, it's gonna be, painful. So yeah, just regular engagement. Yeah.
With, and I'll say ongoing. Okay, so we would like to engage with the mayor and council in ongoing dialogue about the equity issues that we are focusing on. We will listen to the mayor and council to understand their constituents' housing concerns and educate the mayor and council about equity issues that our commission is working on. I know that could be worded better, but I feel like that captures more or less what we're talking about. Does that seem to get it?
Yeah.
If not in the most eloquent language. Okay, so I know we're running a little bit over, so I want to try and wrap this up. So what I'd like to do is just reread our recommendation. And unless there's something like just really, really out of whack, hope that we can land on this. So our recommendation for the full commission is to refocus the commission's work on equity issues, including desegregation, gentrification and displacement, housing instability, and other related topics as determined by the commission. As a first step, we suggest revisiting and revising our shared language and definitions of equity in plain language that can be easily understood and used by all. We would like to create a visual representation of the equity issues framework that we are using. We would like to engage with the mayor and council in ongoing dialogue about the equity issues that we are focusing on. We will listen to the mayor and council to understand their constituents' housing concerns and educate the mayor and council about equity issues that our commission is working on. And just a note, I said mayor and council because I didn't want to leave the mayor out, and I felt like mayor and council included the mayor and the ward offices like we were talking about. So that's why I did that. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not seeing any raised hands or people saying anything otherwise. So
Well, Neto does have his hand up.
go ahead, Neto.
Jay, just to clarify, Jay, you will not be present at the March 2nd commission meeting?
I will not.
Okay, so this recommendation will go to Lori in the section where the subcommittees make their reports to the full commission.
Cool.
And just a second item, Jay, I sent you a draft agenda. You're on the draft agenda for the item of rethinking.
Yes.
So do I take that off?
Well, I certainly can't be there to lead it.
Right.
But I don't
Okay.
know if that means to take it off. So
Okay. Well, okay, I'll talk to you later about that then.
okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so we've got our recommendation. I will send this around to everyone. Lori, I saw that you wanted me to use a different email address, and I will do my very best to get that. Where's my agenda? Okay, agenda item number 4. Affirmatively furthering fair housing, new proposed rule. I think we've talked about this, and I would like to just move through the rest of the items unless there's something burning somebody wants to talk about for this item.
No, and I'm sorry, I gotta run.
Okay, thanks, Vicki. Number 5, discussion of issues related to gentrification and displacement. 5A, ideas for action. I believe we covered this well. Anybody have anything else to add? Okay. Hearing none. Number 6, HAST implementation updates and discussion. Allison, is there anything that you would like to add here?
I don't think so. I did just want to tee up that prosperity initiative policy conversation that will start on at the next commission meeting. They are right. It's related to HAST because they want to get your input on kind of the housing policy or policies that they kind of want to put forward. Right, so based on kind of the affirmatively furthering fair housing rule and a lot of different conversations and research, as we know, kind of one of the main policies that has risen to the top is right, overarching, really focusing on building affordable housing in areas of higher opportunity, which is obviously a conversation that this group has had. The kind of converse conversation is, I think, also what they want to have with the commission around, you know, and if we're investing in deconcentrating poverty by focusing affordable housing in areas of higher opportunity, how are we then also investing in, you know, traditionally higher poverty areas, and what does that mean for gentrification and displacement? And what does that mean for kind of crafting a policy? And so I just kind of wanted to tee that up and mention it to this group as they kind of ask for feedback. There will be, we're kind of putting together a memo with some of that information for the next meeting. But I don't otherwise have updates on source of income protection or other pieces of past.
I mean, that just sounds like maybe a 5-minute conversation. You should be able to just blaze through that, no problem, I think.
Yeah, it's currently scheduled for 25 minutes, and I'm pretty sure like 15 of that will be presentation.
Yeah.
So that's I think kind of why I'm asking, like, think about it ahead of time.
Yeah. Thanks for the update. Okay, number 7 is call to the audience, and this is a time where any member of the public may address the commission on our subcommittee. Due to time constraints, the time allocated for this is 15 minutes, but I'm actually going to cut that to 3 because we're running short on time, and since there's, I believe, 1 person from the public. Individuals are allowed 3 minutes each. Due to open meeting law, commission members cannot discuss topics that are not on the agenda. Items brought up by the public may be considered as an agenda item for a future meeting. This is the call to the audience. Is there anybody from the audience that would like to address the subcommittee? Go ahead, Victoria. You got 3 minutes.
On me, hold on. I'm sending you my documents. I made them during the meeting while listening and took down those concerns and created kind of the stuff that I've been working on. So anything else that I'll create, I can send to you. And it's just like case study stuff, basically. Please look at my recommendations. I linked about education for your terminology and gentrification and segregation. Those are resources where I've taken classes and workshops. And I'd like to say I do like the workshop idea where when meetings are held in wards, is there an equity to how many meetings, to what topic and for what reason, and how the public can engage. You'll see on the documents me mention a public engagement index and a public engagement model. And so those things are really up to you to design and to work with the main officials. So I'll just send that to you, and I just want to say thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Victoria. We appreciate you attending the meeting and engaging in our conversation today. I just wanted to ask Allison and Neto if Victoria wants to get information to us like she has. What's the best way for her to do that?
Allison placed in the chat the email address, which is
Okay.
cehd@tucsonaz.gov. It's cehd@tucsonaz.gov.
Perfect. Great. So you've got the email address to send us your information. Victoria, again, thank you for joining us today. Appreciate the input. Anybody else from the audience? Looks like Victoria's the only one, so I'm going to assume no. Next steps, our next meeting is March 23rd, 2023. at 1 p.m. And our 8B is items for future meetings. If somebody's got something real quick, that would be fine. But if there's a decent amount, I would suggest maybe we kind of talk over between now and then to get stuff on the agenda. Anybody have any items for future meetings at this point? Okay, hearing none, I will move to number 9, adjournment. Thanks for the great discussion today, everybody. And thanks for hanging around almost 15 extra minutes to work through this. I think we did great work today, and I'm excited about what we're taking back to the full commission. So with that, the meeting is adjourned, and hope you all have a great weekend. Bye, everybody.
But